Greetings, citizens, and welcome to another edition of Flashpoint, a television program of issues and ideas. Flashpoint is brought to you by the Lawrence Debate Union, an endowed co-curricular activity at the University of Vermont, which trains UVM students in the arts and skills of debating and then has them debate competitively, educationally, and hopefully in a fun way against other sentient beings from all around the nation and now the world. My name is Alfred Snider. I'm the Edwin W. Lawrence Professor of Forensics, and I'll be your facilitator for this anticipatory program. Flashpoint is available on Burlington Cable Access Media. You can see it, you can enjoy it, but also it's available for on-demand viewing. Go to debate.uvm.edu, click on the Flashpoint icon, and you will be there with a vast panoply of Flashpoint shows to choose from. I'd like to welcome my guests this week, as always, members of the University of Vermont debate team. And on my left, I have Joseph Torda, who's now an experienced debater. Is that true?
Well, yeah, I would say. Absolutely.
You've got some experience. Way to go. How many Flashpoint shows now?
I've lost count at this point.
You've lost count at this point, and that's the way it should be. And we miss Alex, though, don't we?
Of course.
Of course. And on my right, I have Sam Ricker, who's a Flashpoint regular now. I won't say the other thing we call you about Flashpoint, but you're easy, right?
Yes, that's
okay.
true.
Okay, what's your favorite thing about Flashpoint?
The fact that I get some exposure and kind of overcome my fear of public speaking and putting my image out there.
You're afraid of public speaking?
Yes.
Okay, well, he does a really good job of hiding it, doesn't he?
I would say.
I would say, well, welcome to this week's show, number 350, before the games begin. And yes, we are closing in on number 400. And we're going to have to start thinking about what kind of celebration we're going to have here in the studio for that. But show number 350 we've got to get through first before the games begin. Yes, the world will be coming to Beijing, China for the Olympics. And the Chinese are looking forward to it, and the rest of the world's looking forward to it. But there are some other issues. Is it appropriate to have the Olympic Games that supposedly recognize human dignity and the worth of every individual in a country that may violate these same principles? How do we effectively protest? What are the nature of human rights violations in China? Is China involved in human rights in other places like Sudan and Burma? Well, these are just some of the things we'll be considering on this week's edition of Flashpoint. But let's start by asking themselves, what do human rights and the Olympics have to do with each other anyway? Anything? Nothing? Something?
Well, I think that the Olympics themselves are it's a non-traditional way for a country to represent itself on an international level with, competition, cooperation, overall just interaction with other nations in a non-traditional diplomatic setting. And so I think that human rights is a very important issue with regard to notions of friendship and camaraderie between nations themselves.
Well, the Olympic Charter says that one of the major purposes of the Olympic Games is to enhance human dignity. And I guess if that was something, if you think human rights and human dignity are connected, then that would be one thing. There's an NGO established called Olympic Watch, and what they're doing is trying to monitor China's human rights progress. And they've said that the Beijing Bidding Committee pledged that the hosting of the Games in China, quote, will help the development of human rights, unquote, within the People's Republic of China. So I think it sort of does have something to do it. Now, before, Moscow was hosting the Olympics and the United States boycotted them because of the invasion of Afghanistan. And some people thought that was good and some people thought that was bad. But do you sense that there's much of a feeling in the global community that maybe if things don't get better, that maybe we shouldn't go or should make a stink? Or
well, if you mean if we is the American government,
that's a good point.
Then a boycott, I see the parallel in some senses. However, that was during the Cold War, and there was a much stronger dichotomy set up between the United States and the Soviet Union. China, there are tenuous relationships at the moment with the United States. However, I would say that overall, there are attempts, greater attempts to become friendly, you know, with regard to trade, but just with regard to political interaction. And so I don't think that a boycott is what's going to be on the table, no.
Well, there are several groups that have already established that they want China, want to boycott the Olympics in China because of the various issues that surround this. But I don't know if that has enough steam to get an entire country to refuse to go, let alone multiple countries. And because of, as you mentioned, China's business relationships, particularly with the U.S., I'd say the U.S. won't want to take a firm stance against the Olympics in China because of these massive economic connections.
And so I guess you would say that the human rights violations would have to be really, really, really bad before anybody decided not to go to the games. I mean, we as individuals can say we're not going to the games as tourists or whatever, but to get countries that have whose Olympic committees have fat television contracts might be tough. Well, let's investigate that and talk about human rights in China and the situation. Now, this is from Olympic Watch, the group I talked about, and they are trying to monitor human rights developments, and they say 1 year before the Olympics are to start, there has been no tangible improvement on human rights in China. Media freedom is nowhere in sight. Independent monitors, such as Reporters Without Borders and Committee to Protect Journalists, register at least 30 Chinese journalists and 50 bloggers and internet activists in jail. Chinese domestic media face a policy of systematic censorship, and the reporting of international media in China is blocked. China continues to execute several times more people than the rest of the world combined. According to Amnesty International estimates, this is 8,000 to 10,000 people a year. Torture continues to be widespread, according to the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. And as Human Rights Watch recently reported, human rights violations are taking place in direct relation to the Olympic Games themselves. Hundreds of thousands of Beijing residents have been evicted without proper compensation. A leader of their peaceful protest, Ye Guozhu, has been in prison for 4 years and reportedly tortured. So, I mean, that particular group says stuff's not good. But let's talk about some of the specifics to just get some detail. And the first one that comes up is just the notion of executions. I mean, several times more executions than the rest of the world. What's up with that?
This is true. The death penalty in China is unlike any other country. Now, regardless of you're for or against the death penalty, the notion of it's a just thing to do must, be put in. And there are 68 crimes in China where you can be put to death. And
68.
68. They're the logical ones, such as rape, armed robbery, and murder. Fine. But you can be killed for non-violent crimes like tax fraud, embezzlement, and drug crimes that countries in the world will, imprison you for because they're illegal, but never execute. And the main motivation behind this is the idea of selling organs. Organs are harvested from prisoners almost immediately after they're killed. China's now...
Now, I heard, I don't know if anybody can confirm this, that they have these people on death row, and then if you come and you need an organ, they'll pick one that's a match for you, execute that person. Did you find anything that proves that?
The increased privatization means that you're literally buying something for a specific need, and of course to the highest bidder. So these are typically wealthy people.
That's unbelievable. Do you believe that phenomenon is what is raising the national execution rate generally? And it's because you have rich people coming in and saying, I need an organ from a match, and so they're just finding people to...
Well, I don't think they arrest you first. They go, hey, you committed a crime because you have type O blood or whatever. I think they have them, and then they...
But do you think it inflates the number of people that are put on death row to begin with?
Once you get, the factor of money and economic drive, the demand for organs is higher than the supply.
Right.
So obviously this is starting to correct it in a very violent way. I just want to read one paragraph from this article from Amnesty International that's particularly disturbing regarding the death penalty. No one who is sentenced to death in China receives a fair trial in line with international human rights standards. Failures include lack of prompt access to lawyers, lack of presumption of innocence, political interference in the judiciary system, and failure to exclude evidence extracted through torture. These are basic human rights that are being violated rampantly.
Yeah, so the sale of organs is just an added problem, right? And an added incentive. But I don't think I don't think that organ sales is driving the number of executions. I just think they have a very different view of what the death penalty is for. And no one protests very much when someone who's like a corrupt politician who's stolen hundreds of millions of dollars gets caught and then is executed. But, you know, if someone is cheating on their taxes and gets executed, that's a little different. I don't know. But that's a very serious problem. And of course, you know, the U.S. executes people, and so we're not immune from that criticism. I don't think we sell their organs or execute them on demand.
But I think it should be pointed out that China's main method of execution is by shooting someone in the back of the head, as opposed to lethal injection, which is, you know, a whole fundamental debate on what's the humane way. But that's another topic.
Yeah.
Okay, another one is the arbitrary detention, torture, and harassment of human rights defenders, people who are trying to point out human rights abuses in China and who are trying to make them more public, to talk to the international press, to use the internet to do this, you know, have been, you know, systematically harassed. And not just harassed like you lose your job or they make loud noise at night, but torture as well. Amnesty International wrote, the authorities have taken no measures to reform or abolish articles of the Chinese criminal law which are frequently used to detain and imprison human rights defenders and others in violation of their rights to freedom of expression, association, and assembly. One resident reported, the Olympics is good for China. It shows that we have the ability, the strength, the will to hold such an international event, but it should not be used as an excuse to hurt ordinary citizens, to drive them from their homes. And a lot of property has been like confiscated and people not sufficiently, you know, compensated for their property. And then those people who've tried to represent or publicize or whatever, then this have been harassed, tortured. One of the leaders has been sent to jail for 4 years for trying to bring international attention to this. So that's kind of a problem as well. And of course, it's all legal.
Right.
But there's some other pretty bizarre things, and I know that we were all stunned to be reading about re-education through labor. That has really an old-time communist feel to it.
Oh yeah,
re-education through labor, and I love your reaction.
It's like shipping someone off to the gulag. This is Soviet-era tactics.
Yeah, is that true, or what do you know?
As far as I can tell, this really seems to be the case. You have people that are, you know, it's a strategy that's used by the Chinese government in order to sort of clean up the city for the Olympics, for Beijing, but also I believe the rest of the country. People can be sent to these labor camps for their re-education for a period of 1 to 3 years, and with the possibility of another year extension. And this sentence is imposed on them by the police without charge, trial, or judicial review.
So just like we don't like you, off to the work camps.
Yeah, you're in violation of a particular law, and you're off. You know, the Amnesty International they've stated that there's a high risk of torture in these camps, particularly if people are refusing to acknowledge their offensive behavior. So, you know, if you don't admit that you were wrong, then for something that you may not even be sure that you've committed at all, then you're going to get tortured. It's shocking, you know.
And what are some of the things you can be sent there for?
It says here that some of the serious cases of unlawful behavior would be advertising or leafleting, unlicensed taxis, unlicensed businesses, and vagrancy and begging. So a beggar, and also if is a serious offender would be someone who's been engaged in such acts more than twice.
Okay.
So if you were a beggar and you're caught on the street for the third time, you're eligible to be sent away to
3
one of
strikes
these.
in your gulag. How do you get?
Yeah.
How long do you get sent there?
A period between 1 and 3 years, with the possibility of a 4th-year extension.
Okay. So that doesn't sound like. I mean, that sounds bad. And I mean, who knows about them? The news media is not being able to report about it.
Right.
And the Chinese media certainly doesn't get to report about it because they're very tightly controlled.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of a contradiction because the Constitution of the People's Republic of China incorporates the spirit of the importance of all these. For example, Article 35 guarantees freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, of procession, and of demonstration. But that's not the way it works out.
So what document is that taken from?
This is from that's Article 35 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China.
Wow.
Yeah, but apparently it's, they need a better Supreme Court or somebody.
Yeah, right. It sounds like a pretty loose interpretation of their Constitution.
Human Rights Watch says decades-old system of stringent government control over domestic media, effectively rendering the bulk of China's media news content components of a vast national propaganda system, remains mostly untouched by the reforms since 1979. Domestic news content in China is painstakingly filtered through outright censorship of material deemed objectionable by the Communist Party and a web of rules and regulations that strictly limit the reporting scope of journalists. Chinese journalists are also given financial incentives to maintain the status quo. I guess you get a I'm Never Critical medal and a bonus check if you do that. Here's what Melinda Liu, president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of China, has said. Some reporters have noted improvements since January 1. However, there are continuing instances in which foreign correspondents have been experienced interference or their Chinese assistants and sources have been intimidated. Since January 1, a number of international journalists have been summoned by the Foreign Ministry for reprimands. Many correspondents believe China has not yet lived up to the promises made by Beijing authorities of complete media freedom during the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
So does that mean for a few weeks we're going to have complete media freedom? Or?
Well, I think that's the idea. However, I mean, as was raised, it's not being implemented. This idea of free foreign media is a complete fallacy. Due to the bureaucracy.
Well, they're being harassed now. The foreign media is being harassed now.
Right.
And the Chinese media can't report. But do you think they'll really lift the veil and allow freedom during the Olympics?
Well, no, because they have a tight control over the internet, which is, as we all know, you can start a blog right now and talk about what you're doing. The internet is supposed to be a very free tool, but they're even controlling internet use. They're arresting bloggers. They're putting people in jail for trying to get the word out through other means of journalism. And if they can control this mass thing, the internet, then what else are they going to try to stop?
I might disagree. I might say that during the Olympic Games themselves, you're going to have too many foreign reporters for the Chinese government to go in and smash their cameras, and on top of that, they're going to be under the eye of the international community. You're going to have people that are going to want to watch the games. They're going to want to know what's happening, and I mean, it might obviously like media coverage will be more focused toward the games themselves, but this idea of People's Republic of China coming in and censoring all media outlets, I think it's unrealistic.
Well, I might stake out a position between what you're saying, because I think that they might be cracking down now, so that to intimidate people, to chill things. I think that a lot of people who could speak to reporters and say bad things, maybe, re-education through labor, or sent out of the country, or
right.
I mean, huge amounts of the population are going to be relocated during the Olympics. There's not going to be any cars. I mean, the whole society is going to freeze during the Olympics. So I think that they're going to crack down now, and then they hope not to have to act during.
Right.
Right. But the thing is, I mean, some Chinese people might say now's the time when everyone's watching to really, and then we could see some problems, both for the foreign media and for the people of China.
So you might say that they're attempting to create in Beijing a sort of a bubble.
Yeah.
So that you have.
That's what I think.
The games themselves and maybe a few people that are general supporters of the government, but you're not going to see tons of underprivileged or dissenting individuals.
It's kind of like the famous Potemkin village of communist Russia, the perfect village that the reporters would be brought to and everything, and they would see, oh, ain't socialism wonderful?
Right.
And now there's going to be sort of a Potemkin Olympics where the city's isolated, people have been moved out, there's going to be 1 billion security, uniformed and plainclothes there, and it's going to be more like a movie set.
As I understand, they're shutting down traffic entirely within the city limits.
Relocating steel mills.
Right. And there also, isn't there an attempt to control the weather?
Yes. I feel shocked to say this, but they are trying to control the weather by shooting up sodium iodide pellets in rockets in hopes to create seed clouds so that it will rain before the Olympics rather than on the Olympics. And the notion that this will even work can be disputed. So they're just going to try this. It's mad science.
Okay, there's another couple of issues, and those are Chinese activities abroad, considering 2 human rights problems. And the first one is Sudan and the ongoing genocide against the people of Darfur, which there's pretty much almost universal rejection of the kind of policies of the Sudan government, which are to not protect people they don't like, to encourage militias to rub people out and move them away, and basically to engage in ethnic cleansing of a whole region of the country. But China seems to have been, very much in support of that. The International Herald Tribune said one reason Beijing stands behind the Sudan government is oil. China is trying to diversify its oil sources beyond the crisis-prone Middle East, and Africa is one obvious alternative. Already 7% of China's imported oil comes from Sudan. I understand that China has helped and encouraged the relocation of people in the oil fields by the military sort of chasing them out. I understand that there are thousands of Chinese soldiers in Sudan now guarding the oil fields. I mean, they're not genociding against people, but they're guarding the oil fields, and the result is that the only economic development that's really going on in Sudan is connected to Chinese and some Gulf state investment in oil. So they've got to bear some responsibility for what's going on.
Absolutely. And whether you'd argue for tacit consent or explicit consent, the Chinese government is very aware of what is happening there, and they've chosen to turn a blind eye, in a sense, as well as just actively participating in completely specializing the economy of Sudan, as well as allowing for essentially genocide to take place under their watch.
Oh, yeah, because the oil money that China is giving to Sudan is being funneled into paramilitary groups like the Janjaweed, which are actually committing the genocide. So if Chinese interests weren't there, you'd argue that the funding wouldn't be there either. And so indirectly, they are killing people.
They wouldn't have guns, they wouldn't have finance, and then they wouldn't have international support. Don't forget, the Chinese government sits on the UN Security Council. And this idea that they would reject any sort of international involvement in the area, this is huge.
And it might come back to haunt the Olympics as well. As we get closer, genocide China Olympics connection might be drawn. Here's a Washington Post editorial that says, so Sudan's government feels it can ignore Western revulsion at genocide because it has no need of Western money. But the bigger question is why China, along with Sudan's other Arab and Asian partners, feels free to trample on basic standards of decency. China's economic model rests on access to Western markets, access that can't be assured given popular resentment at China's growing trade surplus. Equally, China seeks acceptance at the world diplomatic top table, and this cause is unlikely to be advanced if China is perceived to be complicit in genocide. Imagine the newspaper ads leading up to the Beijing Games of 2008. Human rights campaigners will call on the world to boycott the genocide Olympics of 2008. And I think there's a very active community of people around the world condemning what's going on in Darfur. And I think at some point they might be connecting the dots.
Absolutely. No, rhetoric is incredibly powerful. And the term genocide Olympics is, I mean, it's pretty chilling. That's going to be hard to ignore.
Yeah, and the fact that any exposure to this will allow more people to see what's going on. I mean, I don't know if everyone knows about the situation in Sudan, but if you start connecting that with the Olympics, which is an extremely popular event, the average layperson on his couch or reading his newspaper will make this connection, and just this general exposure will, put more pressure on China.
But wait, with China, you also get more. Myanmar, or Burma, I like to call it Burma, because that's the traditional name, not the name that the military dictatorship gave to it. I mean, we've all seen in recent days the human rights situation there, appalling. The country is collapsing. Buddhist monks who were protesting, thousands of them, rounded up, murdered, blood all over the temples, and it's bad. And China bears some responsibility from this. This is from the LA Times just a day or so ago. The shame and misery of the Burmese junta, claimed Christopher Hitchens in Slate magazine, will endure just as long as the embrace of China persists. Hitchens isn't the only pundit casting China as puppeteer to the junta. China must use its special relationship with the junta, explained Nobel Peace Prize winner Jody Williams, to arrange the release of Ms. Suu Kyi and hundreds, if not thousands, of other political prisoners. So China traditionally says you should never intervene in anybody's individual affairs, so, this is another issue. Well, we're out of time, and so I want to ask you, will there be a human rights movement associated with the Olympics in 2008, or will it just be TV viewing as normal? And I'll start with you, Joe Torda.
I'm extremely excited to see what's going to happen. I feel that people in China, as well as the international community that will be present, are not going to be able to keep their mouths shut. Something is going to happen. This is going to be a very important political arena during the 2008 Olympics. I'm excited to see changes. Changes will happen.
Sam Ricker.
There better be some kind of outcry. I mean, I for one can say that none of these people are being alarmist. Sure, some issues you can't get as fired up about, but when you can make a person disappear for their crimes and you can kill someone and harvest their organs, this is turning into a bizarre V for Vendetta-like nation that, we can't ignore the situation and let them have these games here.
All right, I say yes, but we won't see it on the American media. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget, think for yourself.